I feel like this would be like making a Spanish tortilla with potatoes and all the, everything that goes in, all the glory that goes into a Spanish tortilla, and then calling it a frittata, which is Italian.
Right, we're live. Welcome to Money Lap Podcast. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon and Cassill. This is our podcast about all things motorsports. Of course, check out themoneylap.com for the best 5 minutes of motorsports delivered to your inbox 3 times a week. We're pretty proud of that. But Landon, we start this podcast, as always, talking about ourselves.
Yes.
It's the PR lap.
We
jump into it?
Are just lovable creatures and talk about racing. And so the Money Lap. What you usually do this part? What am I doing right now?
I don't know. I was letting you run with it.
What am I even doing? I just felt like I had to talk. I'm looking at these reviews. We've got some great reviews. We always love reading them. So let's hear about it.
All right. So no new Apple ones because we haven't really set a goal for everyone, but we are up to 118 and 5 stars across all 118. So we're just crushing it there.
Nice.
Spotify, we've got 79 reviews and a 4.9. That's ridiculous. Whoever took our 0.1 of a star. And then on YouTube, we did have some cool comments from last week's episode. Haxmeyer said, "Yo, I'm so glad I found this. I always ran out of NASCAR podcasts by the end of the week. Yee found one to fill the void." Interesting way of writing. Geeky Fast said, "Keep up the great work. A win is coming for myself," which is nice of them. But Landon, the coolest review we got this week happened to you in person.
Yes.
Up in New York City.
Yeah, I was in New York over the weekend, and I was in Soho shopping at Madewell, and Aaron at Madewell, when I was buying some clothes, goes, "You look a lot like the NASCAR driver Landon Cassill." And I just kind of was like, "Well, I am the NASCAR driver named Landon Cassill." And he's like, "I knew it was you. I knew it." And then he turned to his colleague and said, "Yeah, this is Landon Cassill." And he actually said, "I love listening to your podcast." So
Bam.
that was that in itself was even more of a uplifter for me that day than even just being recognized randomly in Manhattan. So awesome. Shout out to Aaron. Shout out to Madewell. They've got a great menswear line this fall winter 2023.
What did your wife think of this moment when it happened and the podcast was mentioned of all things?
I think that her attraction for me just was through the roof. I think she was super impressed, proud of her husband, and it was a good day all around.
That's that's the best PR lap we've heard in a while. I did have a lot of fans at the track this week have similar sentiments, but that's where you expect it. You don't expect it in New York City in Soho. So Aaron, who might be our only listener up there, we appreciate the support. So that's awesome. Should we jump into the big motorsport stuff now?
Yeah, let's talk about racing.
This weekend. All right, so we'll start in NASCAR and the Xfinity Series, where I was in an elimination race for the playoffs, and unfortunately was not able to make it through. Lost out by a couple points, but this was really fascinating, Landon, because I think there's a lot to dive into. One, my team and myself had a really, really good day, but the problem was on this day, on Saturday, in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, if you wanted to advance to the round of 8, you had to be exceptional. And it was really evident to me when we were 12th in practice, which I was pretty proud of because I had not been to the Roval since 2019 in Cup, which is the only time I've been there. And we can dive into why that place is so difficult, but it is one of the most difficult places, I believe, to get up to speed. We qualified 6th, and I was like so happy about that. It was like top 2 in our group for a while. The only problem, Daniel Hemrick and Sheldon Creed qualified 4th and 5th, and I was like, come on. And then we got in the race, and obviously Sam Mayer was on the pole. He was super fast. He was able to flip the stages and keep track position where we all had to fight for points, and it sort of just fell in his hands. And so what I took away from this, though, was by the first stage, I did an okay job, but in stage 2, it was like 3 or 4 laps in, I found something in turn 8, which I had worked on in the sim. Even on Friday, I went to the sim for an extra hour and tried to work on this, what I'd observed AJ doing, but I couldn't figure it out. I finally figured it out. It clicked, and literally the next lap, they're like, "You're the fastest car on track. You're the fastest car on track. You're top 3 speed, fastest car on track." And I'm like, "Yep, found it."
What was it?
It was turn 8, turn 7 and 8 over the
Which
hill
one's
there.
turn 8?
So
Going
turn
back
8's
onto
the
the
last
speedway?
one is onto the speedway. Turn 7's the one before that. It's how you approach that hill crest to set up for 8.
Mm-hmm.
AJ has a very wide line compared to most people who try to cut down low. But when you got low, you end up overspeeding 8 every time. But there's this amazing grip strip that if you enter high enough and trust that the car that launches off that hill and launches off that crest is going to land and not slam the wall, you can gain a tremendous amount of speed. Well, the reason it works is there's a weird grip strip that I found, and that's why AJ does it. And it was an unlock of epic proportion, worth tenths of a second.
Definitely sets you up for a good angle too for off turn 8.
And that's why he's so good off 8, and that's where all the speed is. And so, once I figured that out, so my point of bringing all that up was that I said to someone afterwards, I said, if we could have just restarted the weekend after lap 23 or whatever, when I found that 22, we have a chance to win this race. But it's like, I had to play catch up, and that place is so tough because this is where I want to get your opinion. You were really fast there last year. What I find so tough about that place compared to almost anywhere else we go is there's very few points of reference for braking points and speed points and that sort of stuff. And so what you find is like turn 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 to 8. There's no braking markers. There's no traditional things that you can use. And so what I find is it's a very feel-based place. You have to sort of understand and have like a feel for how much speed can I throw at this corner and trust that it's the max amount for the slip angle of the tire and then slow down to that next apex. And I think that's what makes that place just a really interesting racetrack that can be, almost sightline-wise disorienting, especially in turn 1.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of – I think every driver has a different way of, having a point of reference. So I think it's hard to say across the board that is a particular reason. I just think that there's just not a ton of opportunities there. It's a lot of corners are very momentum type based corners. Just thinking turn 1 is a tough corner to outbrake someone into. Not that it's not a passing turn, opportunity. It's just, you can't fire it down in underneath someone into turn 1 because if you do, your apex comes up quicker. And we've seen, what happened to Jeb Burton. It's really easy to overdrive that corner and miss. Turn 2, 3, 4, just really round radiuses, momentum type corners. So it's just not a ton of passing opportunity. And so it can just makes for, to me, that's one of the things that makes it a challenging track to get through the field on.
I think that's a good point. But my point on the speed side, what I found interesting was the biggest unlocks from practice to qualifying was just how much speed I threw in those 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8 area of corners that are very much like you put it. They're, both are almost decreasing radius style corners, the 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And then sort of, and then, you decrease your speed. And so my point there is like, it's like slip angle of the tire. It's a type of corner that requires you to have an immense amount of trust in how much speed you're throwing to the center of that corner. If that makes sense.
So maybe I'll find another way to articulate that because it is those are corners where you are taking max lateral capability out of the tire, right? So
yes.
that's a tough thing at a road course when you're going back and forth, left-handers and right-handers, to maximize lateral as opposed to, think Road America where you're bombing it into a bunch of corners with long braking zones. Not that lateral isn't, a focus at that track, but you're just going from like a whole sequence of corners at Charlotte that's like turn 1, 2 is maximizing lateral on a left-hand turn, and then 3 and 4 you're maximizing lateral on a right-hand turn, then you're doing it again in 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8, and it's just like that's, that can make it very difficult to find the right, radius and speed to take that radius. I totally understand what you're saying there.
So
hopefully
that plus, let me ask you a quick question. I'm going to play a game with you here. Okay, what is your breaking point into turn 5?
Which one's turn 5?
It's the one off the backstretch. From 3 to 4 is the long right-hander.
Okay, so the first
Apex
right-hander.
It's the first right-hander of 5 to 6 up that hill. And then you go
I
to
want
7,
to
8.
say you're out kind of on the runoff. The runoff is sort of paved, and I want to say it is there's an area on your left where the paint starts.
Yep.
And I want to say you're starting to break somewhat before where that paint starts. You don't quite get all the way there. But okay, you're backing me into the point that you're making. But
exactly.
It's not a matter of signage to me. It's more like the track shape is why the references are difficult, because for me, I don't think about that corner about lift point and brake point. That particular corner, I'm thinking about where is my min speed and apex point, and then I back it up from there, right? And so I'm looking at that corner, and I'm like, my eyes are going to the right, and I'm looking at the curbing in turn 4. Yep. I think it's turn 4, right?
No, turn 5 into 6.
Or turn 5. And I'm looking at the curbing in turn 5, and I'm thinking to myself, this is where I want to be released from the brake pedal, like, releasing the brake pedal and touching throttle to get to turn 6, right? So it's not a threshold braking corner, right? It's not a straight line braking corner. You're braking at an angle. So the actual
I would never use the throttle between 5 and 6.
Yeah, you're maybe not. I mean, maybe on qualifying or something like that. But to me, it's more. I don't want to be as mechanical as saying, am I touching throttle or not? It's just more min speed. Like, where am I trying to place the car? I mean, that's actually, I know it's on our list to talk about. Like, why is AJ so good at these road courses? In my opinion, where AJ is really, really good, better than anybody else, is his accuracy. He is extremely accurate with things that I'm talking about right here. Like, he knows exactly where he wants to place the car. And that's step 1, right? Like, you got to know where you want to put the car. He knows exactly where he wants to place the car in every corner. But then what he's really good at in executing that better than anybody else, in my opinion, is when you're entering a corner at 150 miles an hour, 180 miles an hour, if it's the end of the backstretch at Road America, and you have to slow down to 45 miles an hour. AJ knows at 180 miles an hour how much brake he needs to be using to consistently slow the car down to 45 miles an hour at that exact point that he needs to be going 45 miles an hour and then accelerate out of the corner. He knows exactly how much brake to use through that entire braking zone without making adjustments to his deceleration, right? That is, to me, that is one of the master unlocks of road course racing, is when you go to the brake pedal on a road course, if you can go through that entire braking zone without making adjustments to your foot, to the brakes, right? And not feeling like, oh, I'm using too much brake, I'm going to let off a little bit. Oh, now I'm going too fast, I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure. Like, it's those tiny little adjustments that, and you can see it in data. It's race fans don't have a lot of access to data, but like, you can see a speed trace where, just imagine a line on a graph going down at an angle, and a driver like AJ, his deceleration line will just be like straight. You could almost like hold a ruler to it, because he's just slowing the car down consistently with no adjustments. Where a driver that's not as good, you'll see variations in that line, little bumps in that line, because the driver's making adjustments like, oh, I need to slow down faster, or I need to slow down less. And they're constantly making adjustments to the brakes. And that is costing you grip and costing you speed and costing you accuracy. So, like, what I saw at the end of the Cup race, we'll just transition right into the end of the Cup race.
You're really jumping ahead on here, by the way. Can I just cut you off for 1 second? So I want to dive into all that because it is super good stuff. But you did just ramrode through our list of topics so quickly. Just to cap off the Xfinity side, one driver who did all the things you're talking about really well, better than anyone that on this weekend, was Sam Mayer. Wins in a must-win position. That was an excellent drive by him. Probably the best of his whole career in NASCAR. really just a stellar job there in terms of being accurate and finding speed. And so with that, he found himself in a must-win going on to the round of 8. So impressive by Sam Mayer. One thing I did tell if you listen to last week's episode, I did say that I was going to try a new type of coffee this weekend, and I did try it. And unfortunately, it didn't cause a better result, but I did enjoy it. I did have my best qualifying of the year. So let's put that.
There you go.
Maybe that was what it needed.
We got to dial in the formula a little bit.
Yeah, we got to dial in the formula just a tad, but it was the Focus Coffee by Four Sigmatic. But my favorite is the Think Coffee you can buy on their website at foursigmatic.com using the code MONEYLAP for 15% off. It is the coffee that has powered me to wins before. It will again in the future once we dial in this right ratio of Focus and Think Coffee. If you want to try that coffee, go to foursigmatic.com, use the code MONEYLAP, 15% off. Trust me, it's worth it. So, as you alluded to here, Landon, in the Cup Series, AJ Allmendinger wins at the Roval. He was put in this ride earlier this year, announced around this time, actually last year, that he was going to be doing this for Kaulig Racing with the intention of getting this team into the playoffs, winning a road course, doing what he does so well, and he did that. And you alluded to what makes him so good at road courses. So I was just on a podcast earlier today, Nate Ryan's NASCAR and NBC podcast, which will come out this week. He asked me the same question, and I said, well, funny enough, we're going to talk about it on the Money Lap, and Landon has a great view of this. I did call you out because you were his teammate. Yeah, I gave you reference for this, and I basically tried to articulate, maybe not as well as you just did, your point. And what I think is really fascinating is this braking point of being super disciplined and consistent with the brakes. And one of the things that I don't think many forms of racing have okay, so let me rewind that. What makes NASCAR stock cars on road courses so the braking so important is that these are the longest brake zones in all of motorsports for many of our places we go. So if you look at Turn 1 in Indianapolis on the road course, that or Turn 5 at Road America are possibly the two longest brake zones in the history of modern-day motorsports. Like, nowhere is a car tasked to brake for 700 meters or whatever it's 700 feet. It's like it just doesn't happen. For example, a lot of racetracks we go to, they'll have signage for 99% of the race cars that go there for braking points. But when the NASCAR stock cars show up, we have to add signs. Many of them, sometimes from a 4 all the way to an 8 to just have enough signage. And therefore, the braking zones are where you spend a massive amount of time per lap. And so if you can condense those or be perfect with those or be, as you described, have this amazing ability to know exactly how much to brake to that point and be super disciplined and consistent with it, that is going to equal speed. And what the other thing it does is when you're super consistent and you're super, disciplined with it, it helps the temps within the brakes. It helps the temps within, as the brake temp transfers to the tires and the air within those tires. It can make the longevity of your car and the speed it can produce better. And so all those things factor into what you're saying, where that is what makes AJ so good at these road courses.
Yeah, it's extremely high level of accuracy. I think that to me, that was a difference maker on him winning the race and not winning the race. Particularly talking about the last 15 laps, right? To me, I thought William Byron clearly had a faster car, or had the capability of being faster. But he just wasn't as accurate in those closing laps as AJ was, right? You could see Williams sort of missing apexes by a couple feet here and there. And it wasn't a lot, but it was just enough that AJ's consistency and his accuracy would always get him those extra 2 or 3 tenths when he needed them. And, really kept the 24 car from being able to have an opportunity to make a real attack.
Yep. You nailed that, because I think right then and there was a possibility that William was a little bit faster, right, for a short moment there. But there was no way he was ever going to get to the 16. Like, over in the places that it mattered to pass, he wasn't going to get them. It just wasn't going to happen. And one of the things I talked about earlier today was that, AJ, a lot of fans don't know this, but AJ, when I was a young driver coming up in the open wheel ranks, there was a folklore about him because, and we've talked about it maybe a little bit on here, but he was this driver that had, found a way to get to the highest level very much on, his ability to win and in, just performing at high levels and the right opportunities. And it was funny because when you were a young open wheel driver or coming out of karting, you'd be at Skip Barber or any of these places with driver coaches and that sort of thing. And they'd talk about every driver out there. And then there would be AJ Allmendinger. And it was like, he's the class. He's the best there is. He's the best American driver there is at the time. And, in another world, in another time period, he may have been on his way straight to Formula One. He ends up staying over in doing American open wheel, becomes very successful at the end of it. And, Red Bull thinks he's so damn good, he's going to go to NASCAR, which he's never done, which is the biggest motorsport in the United States at the time, and, be a part of their new massive investment in his team. I mean, it's just an amazing career that he's had to get to where he is. And I think the reason I bring all that up is that the emotion he showed after, which he's always emotional, but the emotion he showed after winning this weekend was very real. And I text him that because I was just like, man, that's the stuff people don't always get to see. And a lot of it has to do with the idea that, one, he's in his early 40s. Even being in Cup at this point is pretty amazing. He made all the way back there. But two, there is a lot of rumors out there about what is the future of Kaulig racing for him, for if he stays in Cup or not. And, obviously the guy is a premier level talent that deserves to be in the Cup Series, but for whatever reason, because of the financial situation within the sport, it can't justify giving him what he needs financially to be there. And so, from all intents and purposes, it sounds like potentially he is not going to be in the Cup Series again next year for Kaulig. And, you saw that in his emotions of thinking, maybe this is the last time he gets to do one of these and be at the highest level winning. That's tough.
Well, I was pretty happy for him to see that, and just really impressed once again by his abilities. And I don't know, it kind of motivates me to want a road course race. Like, I feel like I can see it. I see why he's good. I think I can articulate it. I think I know why. I'd love to. It makes me want to race these road courses and get better at it. And
you definitely should. You should do it. The one other thing I'll say is, this situation of AJ, there were some interesting comments in his post race in terms of, Kaulig Racing getting grilled about the financial situation, what they were deciding to do. I do find it disappointing that when you look at, this is no different to me than the Kyle Busch situation, in that, these are two competitors that should have immense value in this sport, right? Should be held to such a valuable level because of their ability to go out there and perform at the highest level and get wins, which should matter most. And yet they're basically, both in both situations in different capacities are told, your value is not what, the sport can't support what you're really worth. And right. I just think that's a tough situation. And hopefully in the coming years and months and whatever, that's solved. But I do find that frustrating. I think that is, it's not dissimilar to other sports. I'm sure it happens in other ones. I don't know them as well. But to me, it's frustrating to see a guy that damn good not be in a position to just do whatever he wants.
Moving on.
Let's talk about cutting corners. We will do it. I didn't do this at the top, but we should have said we're going to do a whole track limits discussion as well, because we both have opinions on track limits. With that, in NASCAR, there is no real track limits other than you can't cut a corner. You can't cut these chicanes, that sort of thing. It's actually great. I love the rulings. The only ruling that's a bit odd is that if you do cut, you have to come to a full stop, which is unusual compared to other forms of racing, where if you do cut a track, you basically just have to give back the positions or the time you had gained. And it's usually a pretty simple system. Hey, you blow through a chicane and you pass two cars, let them both back by, and then restart get racing again. It's kind of like a no harm, no foul sort of situation. In NASCAR, no matter how you end up in there, whether you get pushed in there, spun, whatever, if you don't come to a complete stop after going through that area of a chicane, you got to go to the next zone and come to a complete stop, which happened to Bubba Wallace. Does it seem a bit draconian of a ruling that we have.
I don't think so. I think our racing is different than, Formula One and sports car racing. The fields are a little bit more spread out. We don't have double file restarts in those series. And, I think if you take Portland last year, for example, there was such a bottleneck of traffic, and it was such a guarantee that there was going to be some kind of spin or incident or risk of damaging your car, that and then especially with the wet weather, there were drivers on restarts that were allegedly intentionally taking the shortcut and coming to a stop and then going again, not gaining any track position, but literally just taking themselves out of the risk of getting wrecked.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you saw, Ross Chastain did something similar at Indy. So I feel like it's not all about just the time gain and time loss. I think that, I don't think it's that draconian to say, hey, if you take the shortcut, you have to come to a stop. There's a penalty greater than just, the actual penalty of losing your track position.
Yep.
So I think that it really, I don't mind the policy with it. I mean, I hate what happened to Bubba. It wasn't his fault at all. It didn't seem like the position that he was in. I'm assuming that that's probably where we're segueing into Bubba's scenario.
Yeah.
He got spun. There's quite a penalty in that. And then he also had to serve a penalty. So it was almost like he got, double whammy there on that. Is that enough for me to want to throw out the whole rule and just say that he could have just kept ripping through there? I mean, I don't know. So then what happens next time when somebody gets spun, they do a complete 360, but they stay in the gas and they gain spots because it's still a braking zone down to a first gear, 30-mile-an-hour chicane.
It does make it not a judgment call. I will say that.
Right.
Which
and
it
I
does
don't
eliminates
NASCAR,
NASCAR from a judgment call, which is great.
Yeah. If you're NASCAR, just, I think that you're trying to, simplify your officiating process. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with our current rule structure there.
All right. Well, we'll leave it as is. We've solved it for you. We've answered the question. Don't change it. Hey, internet, it was a big discussion. Guess what? We're not changing it. We decided.
I have the feeling that am I kind of in the minority of the public discourse on that?
The internet, I think, from what you never know because the most vocal are just the ones that are angriest, right?
Right.
But I've seen both sides. I did find it an odd ruling. I remember when we first came up with that rule and it was said to me and I was like, but everywhere else in racing, just give the spot back. But there is discussion there. And I think with how much contact happens in NASCAR, that is a bit of a tough thing for NASCAR because it just becomes such a judgment call and ruling in it. And where were you when you went off? And then, if you fire off in there full throttle and end up crossing into that zone, but you've gained 5 spots because you're going full throttle and then you get back, you go back to that spot. I mean, there's probably too many ways to mess with it as opposed to just straight cut and dry. You go in there, you're coming to full stop. Yeah. The only thing I'll say is I do think it could cause a little bit of hesitation in the braking zones and such, because you have that such a big penalty if you get it wrong. But I don't know if that's been a problem. So, you just don't want to screw up. Let's talk about the Cup Series elimination, the playoffs. They also are an elimination race at the Roval. Unfortunately, Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Bubba Wallace, and Ross Chastain were all eliminated, which brings up our brackets that we'd filled out before the playoffs started, between you, myself, and our producer, Josh. All of us had Busch and Kyle Busch going into the round of 8, and all of us had Blaney out by the round of 8. So we have all been wrong here. Other than that, I had Buescher in the round of 8, so I'm smart there. I've got Larson, Bell, but I've got Keselowski and Busch, who obviously didn't make it.
I think that I think I picked the right ones at least in the round of 8. So I've got Byron, Truex, Hamlin, Larson. I think those are the ones that matter the most. I think Buescher could spoil it.
That's Dale Jarrett's pick. Chris Buescher.
Yeah, I think Buescher could spoil it. So I don't know.
What a career year, man, for him.
It's pretty incredible.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. I think I like seeing, I think of AJ in that similar capacity, Chris Buescher, like someone who has been through multiple Cup seasons of not massive success to then get this success and to see what they do with it. I think it's very cool to see. So to see Buescher, now one step from the championship 4, that's a pretty amazing achievement. And I think he could do it. He's only 3 points, I believe, behind Larson. So he could be a spoiler for sure.
I'm looking at our rundown right now, and you have SMI bathrooms. What?
I've got, okay, I'm going to be nice here. But Marcus, as in Marcus Smith, head of SMI, my man, we got to do something about the bathrooms in some of these tracks. Texas, Charlotte. You go in the garage and these bathrooms, whether it's Xfinity or Cup, in Cup, 2 of the sinks of the 3 sinks that are in the Cup Series garage bathroom, 2 of the 3 sinks did not work. Did not work. It's like, come on. We gotta. I personally want to start the bathroom initiative. Talladega, the bathrooms can be a little bit of a situation, but that's how I see. I want to make this a positive thought sentiment to say, hey, maybe no one's thought of this, but maybe we should just look at these because it is just some of them are so abused and look neglected in so many ways that you're like, this isn't a good look. And we also have a lot of sponsors and VIPs that come to these tracks and they want to be in the garage, they want to check out the haulers and everything, and then they go to those bathrooms and I'm like, yep, this is what you're dealing with. And that's unfortunate. So let's work on that. Let's think about the bathrooms. Even if that's be mobile bathrooms, that's fine.
It must cost millions and millions of dollars to build and maintain really nice bathrooms. For as much money as goes into these events and the high level of people that pay, corporations that pay to join, be a part of these events and help fund our sport, to have a dirty bathroom, it just must be so expensive to maintain a bathroom that we just don't have it in our repertoire quite yet.
It must be something we don't realize in the bathroom jump. My family is in real estate.
It must be like it's impossible. It's impossible. It's too expensive. It's not possible. You can't do it.
There's something about public bathrooms, I guess, versus residential bathrooms that must just increase in 1,000x capacity and cost. Because I think a lot of people out there have built a bathroom or renovated a house, forever, and I don't think it's in the millions. So it's interesting. Moving on, I did get the opportunity to do something I have not done in a long time, by the way, this weekend.
What's that?
I got to go to the Cup race on Sunday with no job or agenda on that day, and so I was able to walk around like a fan. And I did that, and it was
Where'd you
quite
watch
an
the race from?
Experience. So I started down the garage, and then went on pit road before the race, whatever. And then I went over to this area in turn 3 and 4, which was called the I can't remember. Oh, the blind spot, which was this cool setup of like a bar and all this stuff. And I just sort of observed from there for a while. It was cool seeing that perspective and just seeing what people were doing there in terms of going to the bar and going up top and seeing the race from different areas. And then eventually I meandered over to the backside of turn 2, the oval turn 2. Mm-hmm. Hung out with my crew chief, Patrick Donahue, and watched the race. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a really cool experience. And to see, just sort of all these different vantage points and see how people are interacting with the event. I felt like there was a lot of people there. I did feel like it was a very, very good crowd.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I got the opportunity just to like see this from that perspective. And I felt like I came away from there from a higher level thinking this is a great product. Like if you were not as involved in racing as we are, to be able to look at 6 cars running in a line and think, oh, they can't pass. If you're looking at 6 cars running in a line and think, well, that's cool. They're so close together. How's that? That's amazing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
that's where the product seemed amazing. All the cars look great. The presentation of the teams is great. From this other perspective of just sort of looking at it from a higher point of view, I was like, this has the underpinnings to all what it needs. It just wants that more attention.
You
right?
go to the race for the experience and to see the things in real life. It's hard to keep up with a race from the track.
Mm-hmm.
The best way
is.
The best way to consume a race is maybe is
on TV,
from television and to get the story and social media, follow it along with social media and have the NASCAR app pulled up with timing and scoring. That's the best way to kind of understand what's going on. That's how the teams do it, right? They sit on the pit box. They don't the crew chief doesn't watch the race from the roof. He watches it from the pit box with his technology, right? And that's the same way, everybody else should watch a race if they're trying to understand what's going on in the race. The best, the going to a race in person is something that is about the experience. So
I felt that.
I can see that
100%. And I felt like that from that perspective, it was a really cool experience walking around and I went specifically to areas where I felt like, okay, this is a fan area. Like you didn't need a hard car to get where I'm at sort of thing. And I could feel that idea of like, this is fun. This is cool. These are groups of people that came out here just because they're like, this is an experience. They don't know anything. They don't care about racing. They weren't wearing racing gear, but it was like, this is fun. I'm going to come to a race on a Sunday. It was a beautiful Sunday. The smell of race fuel is amazing. Burnt rubber, all of that. One smell I did discover was when the 47 kept going by. I started smelling the smell and I turned to Patrick and I'm like, what is that smell? And he goes, burning carbon. I was like, oh, that's right. Because I'd had that one time in an Xfinity car. And then about 15 laps later, the 47 car was erupted in flames.
That was insane.
Yeah.
Did you see
something was burning before that? I'm telling you, his car would go by and it smelled like straight up carbon fiber burning.
So not, obviously he needed priority number one is to get out of the car, but when that camera shot, the live camera shot of him, off the right front, looking at his car, and it showed the flames sort of shooting out from the right front tire of the car. That was, his fans were still on because they have, there's in those cup cars, there's rocker fans that cool a rocker. I keep trying to say rocker panel, but it's more of like a tunnel, right?
Yep.
And they have fans in there to keep air flowing because those cars are having overheating issues. And so you run those fans at all times. Well, the fire was obviously coming from there or on one side. It must have been going through that tunnel because with the fans on, it was like pointing a leaf blower at a bonfire. Right.
Oh my God.
And that I would imagine played a very large role in the growth of that fire. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the fire was going to grow no matter what, and that car was going to burn down no matter what, but having those fans on, and for whatever reason, those fans must not have stopped or died quite yet. They ran for just long enough to help fuel that fire. In hindsight's 2020. I would never go back and be like trying to tell him what to do. His priority needs to be get out, but those fans need to be turned off. It would have. So maybe
his mind was what's
for
my
drivers
fans
out
doing?
there that are listening, or myself, if you're in that situation, if your car is on fire and you're coming to a stop to get out of your car that's on fire, turn the fans off, turn the power off. And
that's
it
a
might,
good point.
It might buy you a little extra time getting out of your car.
That is a good point. The time it took him to get out was a little scary too. It looked like he was still in there. And
he's a tough guy, and so he didn't show it on his face. I don't know. I might send him a text and see how he's doing.
Yeah, I played kickball with him the other day. He's also a hell of a pitcher in kickball.
Oh, he's an athlete.
He's a hell of an athlete, man.
This is
hell of an athlete.
Totally off topic. Athlete. Ricky and I used to play racquetball, like several times a week together, and I suppose we probably quit playing because I wasn't enough competition for him. Because the best way for us to have a pretty even matchup was if he played left-handed. So
no way
he would play left-handed, and we could match up pretty evenly. And when he played right-handed, I couldn't beat him.
Why have you never invited me to play racquetball?
No, you played racquetball.
I didn't. I've never been invited. This is so. I'm so offended right now. We don't hang out except for the pod. It's a fake relationship.
I did text him. He's okay.
This is a faux friendship. Here, you heard it first here on the Money Lap. It's a faux friendship. Let's move on. And you can bring it back up if he texts us before this, how he's doing. But some news out there that Josh spotted on the Reddits. Something is happening at Auto Club. There are signs indicating that a construction entrance has opened. Now, this doesn't mean the short track potentially is underway. It could just be demolition. But something's happening there.
Well,
what do you think?
Generally, things start with demolition. Demolition has to happen. Some level of demolition. But I will say NASCAR has they haven't really given us an update since in a while on what their plans are with the Speedway. So I think that I saw some posts online of, exactly what part of that entire property has been sold and potentially how much space there is for a Speedway. And it seems like there's still potentially space for a short track, a miniature auto club Speedway to be built. So, and then actually maybe taking a step back for some fans that don't know what we're talking about, Auto Club Speedway, 2-mile racetrack, really a heartthrob of a track for most drivers. And as it's aged and gotten character, a lot of fun to race on, is in some incredibly valuable real estate. And NASCAR, I think, is making a smart decision of developing on that real estate and taking a pretty good business opportunity there, and maybe even turning it into just as good, if not of a better racetrack for the area. So they had released plans years ago on a potential short track, really tight paperclip, like high banked Martinsville style racetrack, you would say. So basically taking Auto Club Speedway, turning it into a miniature Auto Club Speedway, and gave us some plans for that, but then haven't done a whole lot since then. So seems like some things are moving. Obviously, Auto Club losing its date, or if maybe temporarily. So that'll be kind of an interesting thing to watch out of if there's miniature version of Auto Club Speedway. And if you like miniature versions of racing things, well, I got fantastic news for you, Parker.
What is that?
You need to check out SpoilerDiecast.com. With one of the largest inventories in the industry, they have over 800 unique products currently in stock, including diecast, miniature versions of real race cars, and apparel offerings for NASCAR, dirt sprint cars, IndyCar, and F1. And with the pre-order system in place, you can be sure to get your hands on the latest diecast releases without the long wait. What's even better, all orders ship same or next day. Great on shipping. They offer free shipping on orders over $20. Plus, if you use the promo code MONEYLAP, receive free shipping and 5% off all orders. I know that I signed a bunch of diecasts. Hopefully there's still some left. So what was that? Oh shoot, I don't have that written down. What was it? Spend over $50 and you get a Landon Cassill. Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah, it was it was over $50. Get a Voyager car signed by me. So check it out if you like miniature versions of your real race cars. Maybe we can get a miniature version of a miniature version of Auto Club Speedway. That actually would be a really cool model to have around in your office. Diecast cars are cool, but diecast racetracks would be really cool.
Whole new business venture here at the Money Lap. It's a lap.
Let's do it.
Diecast lap. Speaking of spoiler diecast, I had a fan come up to me this weekend who she is a big fan of Money Lap, but she had just bought some diecast at Spoiler Diecast, used our code MONEYLAP, and was excited to receive her signed Landon Cassill Voyager car. So,
awesome! It worked.
It's working in real time. Yeah,
so I'm not just talking about it.
Yeah, no, it's not. You're not talking to the void. People are using this. They're utilizing it. It's awesome. And as you mentioned, they don't just do NASCAR. They have the largest selection of all diecasts, including Formula One, which is where we're moving into next. And this is our next set of topics.
I thought you were just going to read the ad read again.
No.
It kind of sounded like you were just going to do it again.
I just thought it was a fun way to transition.
No, good friends.
No. It's just a good.
Give another one. Maybe they'll just send us more money. Just keep reading it.
And for the next 35 minutes is just going to be constant Spotcast ads. That's actually the best podcast ever. Okay, wait a second. Real quick story before we go to Formula One. I found this podcast many years ago that someone was like, yeah, you got to listen to this podcast forever. Or somehow it was on Twitter saying like, this is a podcast to listen to ever. So I go to this podcast and I swear to God, it's a 22-minute episode. For 7.5 minutes, it was straight ads. And I was like, wait, what? Whoever listens to this would ever want to like go behind this? And somehow this thing was doing well, but I think it was a complete scam where they were just getting people to go listen and then getting paid on a CPM or something.
Maybe we'll do an entire episode where, because you know how people love our transitions from the podcast discussion to the ad reads. We'll just do an episode where we're reading an ad read and it sounds like we're going to transition back into the episode, but it just transitions to like just a seamless transition into another ad read. and it was like right when the ad read starts getting boring, we'll make it sound like we're going to start talking about the cup race this weekend, and it'll just whip back into a oh my gosh.
Our 5-star ratings would just tank immediately at that time. We'd be down to 1 star in no time. We just bludgeon people with ads.
Oh my
Assault
God.
the earbuds with ads. Okay, so Formula One race in Qatar this past weekend. Yeah, you know who won. It wasn't a shocker. But the big shocker was a lot of controversy surrounding multiple topics. The first topic that's come out of the races itself was the actual immense heat. Now, this was a big topic amongst race car drivers because we all like to say who's driving the hottest cars and who's the manliest, basically, if you like that term, or the toughest, whatever. The Guardian, which is a media publication over in England, reported that the cockpit temperatures exceeded 122 degrees. Now, you had multiple drivers Logan Sargent, who came into the race fighting a illness, could not complete the main Grand Prix. It was, what's his name? One of them threw up. Wait, who threw up? Esteban Ocon. He threw up in his car from the heat, apparently. You had so many drivers saying it's the hottest, toughest race they've ever done. Except for Fernando Alonso, who, of course, is a legend and got out and he pulled the old Ron Horner Day and said, "Get up, boys, you're making us look bad." Which was amazing. Lance Stroll could barely keep his head up, and so let's dive into this a little bit. We had Jimmy Johnson, who did a tweet on this because Joseph Newgarden tweeted that he was genuinely interested in seeing some cockpit data comparing the F1 race car of that day versus the hot, humid IndyCar events, because a lot of people believe that those Indy cars are possibly the hottest cars there is. Even Connor Daly told me that. And now add in that they have no power steering in those Indy cars, so they have immense physical strain. With the aero screen, they just get no air, so it's a really tough deal. Mm-hmm. Well, Jimmy Johnson said, "I'm with you and would love to have at NASCAR enter the conversation. Here's my basic opinion since I've had a chance to drive all 3 cars, basically comparing the heat. IndyCar is hotter than an F1 car. A NASCAR is hotter than IndyCar." Pretty self-explanatory, you would think. He said, "G-loading and power steering demands are not factored into my opinion, just cockpit temps." So, with this, 122 degrees in the cockpit would be basically a 90-degree day in a NASCAR stock car, give or take.
Not the hottest.
30 not the hottest.
Not the hottest, but not the coldest.
Not the coldest. The hottest we have seen, at least that I have registered and known about, is right around 150, if not 150 degrees plus in NASCAR stock cars before, which is immensely hot. Immensely hot.
So, but one thing to consider is I don't believe Formula One drivers run cool shirts.
They do not. That's another point. Yep.
Obviously, not all NASCAR drivers run cool shirts, and I've run plenty of cup races in my career at 140-degree cockpit temperatures with no cool shirt on. But the cool shirt makes a big difference.
Huge.
I do think IndyCar drivers are running cool shirts nowadays.
Some are, I believe they are. Some are, and they also have air hoses now as well.
But I think that and the other thing too is I don't know what F1 drivers have for helmet air either.
They don't
have any.
They don't have any. No.
So
that's why. Plus the
it's really
G-forces.
like, to me, yeah, the cockpit is hot. Like, well, first of all, they're in Qatar. I don't know what the temperatures were in Qatar, but if it was 105 degrees outside, it's not that hard to get your car to 120.
Yeah,
Just by
exactly.
being in a cockpit, even if it's open air. The heat of
Yep.
the car, the interior of everything, the seat heating up from the engine and all this stuff, the chassis and everything. It wouldn't be that hard to get your cockpit to 120 degrees, even with just an open air, if the outside temperature is 100 plus. So, and then on top of that, no cool shirt, no helmet hose, no cautions.
Nope.
And physical load on your body and the driving those cars around that track. So the effort is a lot higher. I could totally see where, the actual cockpit temperature just plays a small role in the abuse that those drivers had to endure.
And let's talk about that, because I think you and I both have experience in really hot race cars. Now, the hottest race cars, of course, are going to be NASCAR stock cars, because they're closed. The engine, is right there at the firewall. You have the exhaust and the way it routes around underneath, and the heat, the heat sink that happens with the metal. Now, we've been designed. One, we understand heat, and I always think heat is a bit mental in terms of you can get better in your mental approach to it. You also get smarter in your hydration, that sort of thing. I think a lot of teams and drivers have gotten very smart about the benefit of having a driver that's feeling better at the end of a race. Hence the cool suits that have become basically commonplace, no matter what the temp is outside. The seats that have air flowing through them, the air hose, the air conditioning boxes that run cool air to your helmet, all designed to help the driver over a long race. NASCAR Cup races can be well over 4 hours. An F1 race is not going to be. So there's differences there. Now, a NASCAR stock car, you will not experience the G-forces you mentioned. But one of the biggest things I find through my years, and as all this cooling stuff came about and the differences in the technology around helping the driver stay more with it, was that, to me, one of the biggest things was air. And, if I didn't have at least air being pumped through my helmet and such, when it got so hot, it felt like it was hard to breathe. And so that's where I definitely empathize with these F1 drivers, where some had tried to open their helmet, but when they did that, they're going 200 miles an hour and they're getting sandblasted in their eyes. So I believe one of the things that probably hurt them the most, aside from the heat, was that you have immense G-forces, which are making your heart rate, you're physically having to work very hard. And then two, you can't get, it feels like you can't get air and you can freak out. Right. And I have to think some of the drivers went through that exact moment of it. They couldn't get fresh air.
Yep. Yeah, that's if those guys aren't typically used to using the tools that we do for managing that heat. So they will be doing it soon, though. I can guarantee you that.
I wouldn't be surprised to see damn cool suits. Why not?
Absolutely.
Hell,
well, the funny thing is
running it.
The funny thing is, even if the cockpit temperatures were 110 degrees or 105 degrees or 100 degrees, the cool shirt can definitely provide a benefit. And if there's anybody in motorsports that's capable of doing an analysis of what is there to gain, it'd be F1. Those engineers are pretty smart. They will figure out if getting their driver's core body temperature down 10 degrees, if that's worth the additional couple pounds they have to carry, or placement of that weight, I guess.
What are we going to do if what are we going to do when they decide it's not worth it, and then all the NASCAR teams come to us and tell us that we're not allowed to wear
Yeah, I mean, because on the NASCAR side, I don't think we're entirely scientific about the actual gain of it, right? I think it's a 5 to 7 pound thing that you got to carry.
Yep.
And it's not that you can't remove that weight from somewhere else. It's not a net gain of 5 to 7 pounds, but it's the fact that you have to put that weight in a certain spot. It's, the driver's wearing half of that weight and it's pretty high up in the car. So from a CG perspective and an ability to move the weight, you can't move the weight. So, I don't know. I don't think that there's that much.
I'd have a hard time going
back. But for
back.
an F1 car, an F1 car weighs probably half as much as a NASCAR.
Yeah.
Right. So, 5 to 7 pounds, or maybe they can come up with smaller devices that carry less water. I don't know. but let's just say it's 5 pounds. That has more of an impact on one of those cars than it does ours. So
I'd have a hard time going back. I don't want to go back. Landon, I don't want to go back. I don't care if it's 60 degrees out. I wear the damn thing.
Oh, I wear. Yeah, I mean
it's in it. I wear it.
Once they put one on me, I had a hard time taking it off.
Yeah, I was like, well, yeah. Even like I did one race last year, the dirt race last year in trucks, where I didn't wear. I was like, I don't need it. It's a 150 lap race, and I got pretty hot in the race, and I thought, yep, that's the last race I'll ever do without one. That's in the car. That's it. I just decided.
I had a race last year too that I chose not to wear because I was losing faith in our cool shirt and thought it didn't work very well, and so I just said I'm not going to wear it, and was not a happy camper after the race.
I know the feeling. Speaking of unhappy campers, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell have a incident. Lap 1 of Qatar. Hamilton goes spinning across the track. He's out of the race. Initially, he sort of avoided guilt, but later admitted fault. I'm going to just make it very simple. He's the outside car. He's turning into the corner with all the available ability to not use the track that he used and just squeezed his teammate. It was his fault.
Yeah.
Ooh, disagree, please.
I guess. Yeah, I think it's funny how things turn into fines and placing
fine. He got
$50,000
for he got $50,000 fine for running across the track.
Oh, that was different. Yep.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, the issue with him and his teammate, I guess I don't think I entirely disagree. Other than, we race in a world where it's just a matter of how does it come out the other side, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and
nobody cares who's at fault.
Yeah, it's like you don't really care who's at fault. The guy that's at fault is the guy that ends up in the garage, whether it was really his fault or not.
Welcome to NASCAR.
So it's just there's a pretty big cultural difference there for me to look at something and say, oh yeah, this is who's at fault, because I'm more interested in the outcome. And I'm not saying that's, I don't know, that's kind of a harsh way to look at it, but that's the kind of the roughneck stock car culture.
Well, let's move on. Some fun news. McLaren had the fastest stop in F1 history at 1.8 seconds at Qatar, which is nuts. If you watch the video, it's honestly insane. Go check it out. Maybe we'll link it in the episode description. But yeah, it's just wild. I saw Zach Brown tweeted it and also Instagram the photo of it, and it's just, or the video, and it's unbelievable. So that's a fast stop.
Have they been getting faster? Or has F1
still finding
been
speed?
Stagnant?
No, they've been around that 2-second area for a while, and occasionally I think we've seen some of these sub 2 seconds, but I mean, 1.8 seconds, that's just ridiculous. Now, here's the crazier part. Hold on, here's the crazier part. If you didn't put fuel in a NASCAR stock car right now, they change 4 tires with, 1/10 the people, and they're down. We've had sub 9-second stops.
Mm-hmm.
So they're less than 8x slower with a fraction of the people.
Well, that's not the people isn't even the apples to apples, because our guys can't have to jump over the wall
and run around. Yeah,
you got to wait till the car stop. Like all this. Well, F1, I guess they got to wait for the car stop, but our guys have to jump over the wall, and approach the car. Where in Formula One, they're already positioned. Did we? I wonder if they learned anything from NASCAR being in Le Mans and seeing how fast winning the pit crew competition, us bringing our boys over there and
maybe
taking home some hardware.
You never know. The motorsports world is more connected than people realize.
That's a little silly to say that.
Might
it's
be a
not
stretch.
Like F1 woke up and goes, "Oh, thanks NASCAR for telling us we need to make faster pit stops." But
here's a question for you. Should we dive into what I believe is the stupidest thing in all of motorsports?
Absolutely.
It's not just the stupidest. It is straight up the dumbest and most irrelevant addition to motorsports in all of its 128-year history, 26-year history. Track limits. This is going to be the hill I die on eventually in all of life. And that is that I am yet to hear a professional race car driver, someone who has been paid to drive race cars, ever say to someone, I wish they would just restrict where we could go off that corner. It doesn't effing happen.
We need to get the officials involved.
Yeah, we need to get the officials involved. I would love a judgment call to be made on this. It doesn't happen. And yet somehow, if you look over the course of the last 20 years, we have let this thing seep in from a bunch of people who have never driven race cars. Like, it's the only way I can assume it, to where it has now eroded the basic premise of what a race car driver is meant to do. And people who don't see this truly do not understand what it means to drive a race car. Because if you go back to the history, the genesis of driving race cars, right? And go to maybe the more modern version of what we have now, but let's say the 60s, and where tracks start to become tracks that we sort of use now, and yet they didn't have chicanes. The job and purpose of a race car driver at those tracks was to use every available inch of whatever surface they wanted to go the fastest way around a given lap, right? That is the job of a race car driver. Go the fastest route you can possibly find over a given lap. That means using every available room, bit of surface, whether it's asphalt, grass, gravel, or moon rock. I don't care. You use it. But what has happened is we've changed. We've now had these series of tracks that have shown up in the last decade or two that have gobs of asphalt runoff, because it became evident that gravel and that sort of thing wasn't the best way to slow cars down. Well, therefore, in response to that, they decided, well, that's because the track is how the track designer designed it. That is the fallacy here. A track is not how the track designer designed it. A track is how race car drivers decide and discover what is the fastest route around that racetrack. So track limits go against the very fabric of what actually you should be doing as a race car driver. And therefore, this whole idea of having arbitrary lines of which you can or cannot cross, how many tires can be over them, is the single stupidest, dumbest, most asinine thing in the history of motorsports. And if you support track limits, you are not only an idiot, you do not like racing. That is my thing here. With that, I'm going to say this. Formula One needs to get away from this. They need to set an example for the rest of the motorsports world and enjoy the idea that if their drivers can find a faster route through a corner on the exit without cutting the track, that we've already talked about cutting with NASCAR, and they have a pretty good formula for that. Obviously, you can't make the track shorter. But this whole idea of having the stewards having to go through times that cars were over the line and then having these arbitrary lines, I'm sorry, but it's the single stupidest thing there is. And it's making me really genuinely not like to watch F1 at times because I can't stand it. That's my stance.
I love it. Great job. I couldn't agree more. Track limits, to put it more simply in my own words, having to have track limits is just a result of poor track design. That's all it is.
Yep. 100%.
Granted, I appreciate advancements in safety. I appreciate, that paved runoff is safer than gravel, or easier to manage, pull cars out of. Not every track should just be lined with walls on both sides. I get that. I appreciate those things. But I guess my response to that, my oversimplified response to that is do better.
Yeah. I
agree. Paint a yellow line on the outside of a corner exit and then say, just don't go over it. That's not.
It makes no sense.
Unless you put alligators on the other side of it, we're going to go over we're going to use up the racetrack.
It's so crazy, and there you get these supposed fans. I can't call you fans, because if you're fans, if you point to someone going off in a runoff area, that because there's a curb, you then decide that's not the shape of the corner. To me, that is the ingenuity of being a race car driver and finding more speed. And there should be no rule. That was the way they designed this piece of asphalt and allowed us to run on it within the walls that are there and the physical constraints of a racetrack. not this arbitrary deciding that because a curb was painted somewhere, that's the end of the corner. It's like, it's not even close to the end of the corner. The only places I would agree with this line situation is Daytona and Talladega, because in a lot of ways it's more of a deal where those aren't the racing surface because of the way those races are designed, that type of racing. I still think though you could get rid of those and you probably have pretty fine racing. I think that is a rule that was a reaction to obviously some severe wrecks, but you could even look at those rules and say, we don't really need that, right? We don't need this yellow line rule. So hold on, real quick. I'm just going to end this one thing.
You ended on track limits, and I got one more little teeny soapbox. But go ahead.
I'm not gonna. We have more to go into on track limits. Actually, we do have some others out there that do agree with us. But my last bit of that is to say that people point to turn one at Watkins Glen with the NASCAR and say, well, this looks ridiculous because everyone's going off in that runoff on the exit. And my question to them is, my response is, what looks ridiculous? Why does that look ridiculous? Because you say painted a curb down on the right side. Okay. But you have all this asphalt. So why is that not the racetrack? We go to where the wall is. I'm sorry, but that's how they designed it. It's like, what are you talking about? Anyway, go on your part. What's your soapbox?
I was just wanted to make a language clarification on curb and the European spelling of curbs and the American spelling of curbs, and some of the social media and public discourse that I've seen this weekend using the European designation for curb in reference to an American racetrack, an American curb. My interpretation of this is that you should use the right verbiage of curb and the right region and type of racetrack to identify the type of curb you're talking about. My thought is that this is a similar... Sorry, this is a silly soapbox to be on.
What is happening right now?
It has nothing to do with anything other than I was seeing this and thinking to myself, I feel like this would be like making a Spanish tortilla with potatoes and all the, everything that goes in, all the glory that goes into a Spanish tortilla, and then calling it a frittata, which is Italian.
It was all that for that? It was such a buildup.
Yeah. It's like, no, when you're in Italy, you're eating frittata. When you're in Spain, it's a tortilla.
Is this a Hooked on Phonics episode? What's happening?
I guess you could call it a Spanish omelet, but that's more like if you're in America and you make a Spanish tortilla, you could call it a Spanish omelet.
Would a pizza, sometimes they call pizza flatbread. What's the decide? What do we go there?
I don't know. I think that I think that might have more to do with the type of crust that they're using, the type of dough.
Come to the Money Lab for your wonderful food terminology advice.
If you're referring to the curbs on an American racetrack, call them curbs with a C, because that's the region that you're in. And when you're in Europe, call them curbs with a K.
Thank you for that. Another group that we'll be talking about. We're moving on from this. So we do have some supporters, and one really important supporter, by the way, in the track limits discussion, and that is FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who said the venues like the Losail Circuit and the Red Bull Ring must address track limits problems or risk losing slots on the Formula One calendar. So maybe we have a fan out there at the highest levels of F1 who thinks this is as ridiculous as we do, and that this is just not the fix, right? Basically telling the tracks, hey, figure out a way to make this not look so stupid that we have to talk about these arbitrary lines, and maybe redesign the track or whatever, so that the track limit is because you have physically you can't go there. That's a great track limit in my opinion. Whether that's because of gravel or grass or a wall, whatever, just work on it. So we'll see if they do that. Also, just to cap this off, the Red Bull Ring had 1,200 track limit violations as well.
So dumb.
Just the dumbest thing ever. So if you like track limits, turn off the Money Lab. Leave us, please. You're an idiot.
You're not welcome here.
You're not welcome.
That is awfully bigoted of you, Parker.
I'm sorry. I'm that adamant.
We are open to all kinds of viewpoints. If you want to call it a curb with a K,
that's fine.
To the Charlotte Roval, then you know what? Do it. If you believe that racing should be dumbed down to track limits and dumb ideas like that, then I guess do it. But we're going to disagree wholeheartedly as we have.
I don't even know if I can condone that, but I'm going to let it go. I should just cap this off with one more thing.
Parker is a one-issue voter when it comes
I'm a one-issue voter. It's an election year next year, so yeah, I'm definitely I should say, once again, cutting the course, not the deal. Don't want that. But this whole runoff on the exit corners thing is just ridiculous. Just capping this off, because there's going to be some fans out there like, oh my God, you didn't mention this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some of the Qatar issues were exaggerated or, made worse by the Pirelli tire situation, which resulted in turns 13 and 14 having to be repainted. So they basically then went even further to paint even a further arbitrary line of the line and the curb, and they made the paint, everything looked the same as the curb, so it just looked like they extended the curves, but it wasn't, because it was just paint, so that they could stop the tires from having those high frequency vibrations. And they were only allowed to do 18 laps, I believe, per tire stint, which, because they had some tire issues happening there. Wow. Once again, very nice use, in that situation. I get it. But once again, maybe if you just let them cross over the curves real quick onto the other asphalt straight, they wouldn't have had those tire issues. So there you go. I'm moving on. We did find Josh out there, found one other fun thought experiment from the F1 world. To give an example of, although I've been a Sergio Perez supporter, but I'm struggling.
Hang on a second.
What?
Are we about to have another hypothetical point situation that definitely does not exist in real life and would probably not be the same had
it existed this way? This one's interesting. There's some haters out there for Sergio Perez, which once again, this is actually gonna more so in support my point that the best number 2 is a Sergio Perez, because it allows Red Bull to act as if he doesn't exist. And if he didn't exist, that's what this person figured out. They could have won the World Championship. They would be leading the World Championship points by 100 points right now, even if Sergio Perez just never showed up.
Oh my gosh.
It shows how dominant Max Verstappen has been. And you know what? It also shows that a good number 2 is a serious number 2. And that reinforces my point in Formula One. So
I think you know what? We should probably revisit this conversation about a number 2 when and if Red Bull makes a change and makes a decision. So maybe by the end of the year or off season, whenever there's a driver change, let's talk about it, because we talked about this on the pod several episodes ago, maybe a couple months ago, about what is a good number 2. I just have this thought that it should be competitive, right? The two of them should be competitive with each other. They should be able to run equal equipment, but you've made good points that no, the goal is to get one car to win. And so the number 2's job is actually to assist in that, not really compete in it. Which we could be saying the same thing, by thinking, okay, the number 2 could still be the number 2, but he's got to be within a half a tenth of the number 1 driver, not a half a second. But I don't know. It's very interesting. That is a big cultural difference in F1 over NASCAR, where, NASCAR, there's teammates, but they don't operate for the service of one driver officially. Yep. Right. Where in Formula One, they unapologetically serve one lead driver. Or it seems to be that way. So very interesting stuff. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that with Red Bull, because unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for Sergio, it seems like he will be probably doing something different soon.
Poor Sergio. Yes. I just want to say one thing before we go. We're going to end the pod here. We're launching something cool on the Money Lap social channels, which is this idea of who was the Money Lap winner of the weekend over all major motorsports. Basically, whoever wins the poll by the largest percentage margin compared to the other top-level motorsports. And no surprise, the winner this week, when you get this pod, you'll see it out on our socials, was Max Verstappen. And you can see the separation there.
So that he doesn't just win it every week?
Well, we're hoping some point someone gets close to him. So you never know.
Hey, because it's our game and we make up the rules. How about that?
Yeah, we make up the rules. And you know what? If someone goes to Bristol and wins the pole or Martinsville wins the pole by 0.3, that would be percentage-wise on the lap, but ginormous. So
that's probably not going to happen.
That's probably not going to happen. But you never know. So that's the pod. Thanks for listening. Peace, Landon. Hey, before you go, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, click the bell icon below to be alerted to our latest videos. We also request that you let us know every single thing that we did wrong in this video or prior ones in the comment section below. We might just go through and answer them, or you'll make it to the next episode of the podcast or our next video. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to be able to listen to this podcast on the go. And subscribe to our newsletter at themoneylap.com to get the best 5 minutes in motorsports delivered directly to your email inbox every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching.